Welcome, everybody, to Insider's Guide to the Galaxy for the 23rd of May, 2023. And we're here. Chris Vaughan, our marvelous tour guide for the night sky, is here to take you through another exciting episode. And I'm here to run things in the background. My name's Charles Ennis. And I understand, Chris, today you're talking about star parties.
Yeah, it's that time of the year. I think we should give folks tips, and I think we'll come at it from two different sides. So we'll come at it from the hosts planning an event, as well as etiquette for attendees and ways to get the most out of it. So we'll just watch here. A couple more people they're tuning in. So yeah, so without further ado, and Charles, I think you've got some images that you can kind of put up semi-randomly, just sort of illustrating some of the examples of what we're talking about. So feel free to share those whenever you need to.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about planning a star party. A lot of RASC centers do this. Some individuals do it as well. I haven't spent much time making notes on sort of insurance and liability and things like that, although I think there's an element of that for RASC events that, Charles, if you feel like you want to chime in a little bit on that, you can.
I can do that.
But I'll keep it a little bit higher level, and then maybe you could comment a little bit about that before we move to the next section. So basically, try to pick your location that's easily accessible for parking for the guests, that's got minimal artificial lighting. If you can get around it. Not everybody can do that, of course. It's great to have somebody scouting locations or identifying their favorite spot, as long as it's someplace that lots of folks can get to easily. Also kind of important that if people are bringing heavy equipment, big telescopes, heavy battery packs, things like that, that there's a place for them to drive close to the setup site and unload their cars. So that's kind of a thing to think about. Now, as far as when you have the star party, you may not have much choice about it, but if you're going to do it at your discretion, then if it's for the public, try to pick something that's got some bright objects that don't require a lot of difficult practice looking through a telescope, things like that. So the moon is great, the bright planets are great. We're going to have a big summer full of bright planets here once we get deep into the summer months. So Jupiter and Saturn will be back with a vengeance, and that'll be a great time to share those objects with people. If you are going to go with a dark night or a dark of the moon sort of event, maybe you've got some members or some people on hand that have larger aperture telescopes, big Dobsonians, or maybe somebody that's geared up for electronically assisted astronomy, a Mallancam camera, or maybe an EV scope, these electronic automatic scopes. Those ones are great because they'll even stream the image coming through the telescope to local devices, people standing around. Obviously, the moon and planets are also great. They're tolerant of poor transparency. So if you're dealing with smoke, as a lot of us are lately, some of those targets can cut through, whereas your deep sky objects, they're going to be a problem. Now, I like to encourage folks not to avoid the full moon. Actually, there's a benefit that if you're a RASC center and you're doing a star party, and your volunteer pool would rather be observing, remotely at a dark site during the dark of the moon, then maybe book your star party around the full moon and just make lunar lemonade. So show some of the cool things that are visible on the full moon. And there's enough things on the moon that you can actually have different targets, looking at different telescopes, looking at different targets. So if I just share I'll share my screen here for a second and highlight a couple of things that I like to show people on the full moon. Let me just get this set up. Go forward in time a little bit here too. So we're going to get a full moon around the end, early June. I think it's around first couple of days of June.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to share a picture here real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
There you go, full moon.
Nice. All right, let's see.
One of our RASC star parties.
All right, so you'll have to unshare so that
Okay,
I can
unsharing. There you go.
That's all right. All right, Share my screen. Share. Here we go. So this is Stellarium. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the neat things that I think you might want to show folks if you've got a full moon eating. Ray systems are of course de rigueur. So the bright streaks emanating from some of the younger craters on the moon. You've got things, extra elements of that to point out to people. So for example, when you're looking at the Tycho rays, which are lengthy and rather straight lines, don't overlook or skip over the fact that they're asymmetrical, that there's a zone around Tycho where they're missing. That gives us an idea of what direction the impactor would have arrived at before it hit the moon. And then I always get a kick out of the fact that the rays around Copernicus and Kepler are kind of raggedy. They just look a little different. And obviously we like to let people know about Proclus. Let's just zoom in here on Proclus beside Merecrisium. The nice thing about the Proclus ray system is available throughout the waxing phase of the moon, because it comes into view within a day or two after new moon, and then you've got it for the rest of the cycle. And then another really fun one that I like to point out people is the crater Messier in Mare Fecunditatis, which is a pair of impact craters, and then the rays look like the tails of a comet extending off to the west of the moon. So you can find things like that to show people that will delight them even if the moon is full. Then you can look at things like the lunar mare and the color differences and the tonal differences in the basalts. You know, Tranquillitatis is a bluish color, darker color compared to the other mare. You can find individual kind of flows. So if you look at the perimeter, the margins of some of these mare, you can see there's light colored basalts in the interior and then darker flows around the edge. So all of that tells us about the lunar geology and when things happen. And the last favorite thing I'll look at when I'm on the moon are the dormant volcanoes, or the ash deposits in some of the craters. So you've got the crater Atlas here in the northern part of the moon with these two dark stains that are thought to be volcanic ash deposits. And then down in, I guess it's Alphonsus, down in the middle of the moon. Let me just get a little bit lower. Here we go. If you can see it here, this triangle of dark stains in this crater, completely obvious and evident when the moon is full. So those are some suggestions, and there are more. One day we can do a whole insider's guide on what to look at on a full moon. There's more than that even. So that's a thought. All right, what up next? Let's see. Okay, so and I didn't talk about the Reiner Gamma swirls. That's another neat one. You can look it up if you're not familiar with it already. It's a great one. Now, in terms of planning the event with your team of astronomers with their telescopes, it's a great idea to coordinate with folks to assign different targets to them, or even different classes of targets to them, just so that your guests have a variety of objects to look at. It's a great idea to, match up the equipment with the target. So if you've got people with smaller telescopes, refractors, small aperture, Schmidt-Cassegrain scopes, they can be the planet people, the moon people, double stars, things like that. And then if you've got some big aperture telescopes, those are the ones you want to put on your globular star clusters, your Messier 13, things like that, or some galaxies if you happen to be around in galaxy season. And also that comes back to the electronically assisted. So I know in the Toronto Center, we've got several members that when they come to our observing events, they bring a computer, a camera, setup, battery, they've got the whole works, and they can actually, display fantastic views of faint nebulas and galaxies using the integration time of those cameras. So that's a great way to really diversify your offering to the guests when they come. Other neat thing, it almost goes without saying it, but if you're kind of new to star parties, try to plan ahead a little bit about what you're planning to show people, and then learn a few fun facts about them, how far away it is. If it's a binary star, they're orbiting, what's the period of their orbit around one another, things like that. Those are great things to have in your pocket to share with folks. Or even just have your, if you've got your astronomy app like Sky Safari or something like that, or Stellarium, that'll summon up information about objects, be able to bring that up and share that with the people who are visiting your scope and looking through it. Let's see. If you're planning to allow people to take photographs of the objects through the eyepiece, you might want to consider dedicating a scope or two to that lineup, to those. So send those people to that line, because it can be longer, it can be slower, a little finicky. You don't want to hold up the people that just want to use their plain old eyeballs to take a look at something. So maybe dedicate some scopes to somebody that's got the camera, the smartphone holder for their eyepiece. And one other great tip is to have, smartphone adapter attached to the eyepiece, remove that from the telescope, hand it to the person, mount their phone in it, and have maybe a spare one so you can swap in and out, so that you're not taking too long between people's phones. Obviously, you want to be able to advertise and promote your star party, but you also need to be able to call it off if the weather doesn't cooperate. So having a go or no go posting somewhere would be great to have as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up, if it's marginal conditions, oftentimes I'll just have to go and show up and just sit there and then tell everybody, too bad. But it's nice if you got a way to formally alert people. So I'll pause there for a second, and Charles, let you chime in on anything.
Okay, yeah, I just want to do the share thing again. Because we got some more pictures of star parties here, and this is come on, there you go. Ottawa star party there. So you can see that there's an awful lot of light there in the background and the moon, but you can set it up so that there is all kinds of appropriate lighting as well, depending on where you're situated and where you want to do this. And one of the things that is up at the Trottier Observatory, where the Vancouver Center has theirs, are these maps. Now, these are concrete walls along a walkway going to the observatory, and they are lit up at night. So even if someone hasn't brought a map with them, there is a display here showing for everybody that needs it what is in the sky for you to see. So it might be an idea, if you're doing one of these star parties, to put up a map of the sky for the night with a red light, so everybody can share that and see what they need to do. You mentioned insurance, Chris, and the deal with that is the RASC has a group plan for events for insurance. So all you need to do is contact head office, fill out the form, which you can get on the RASC website, give them the details of the date and so on, and then they will issue you with a document for whoever the organizer is for the event, if you're doing it, in company with some other group, to show that you have insurance to cover your volunteers. So it's quite easy to do. It's not going to cost you anything, and it's a good idea to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got folks walking around in the dark and things like that. So things rarely happen, but once in a while something could come up. All right, let me just wind this back here and mention a few more things. So we're still talking a little bit about the organizer side of things. So on the night of the star party, laying the design of your observing field out, you want to allow plenty of space between the telescope setups. That will be important if you've got long lines for whatever reason. Some of these star parties can be pretty big, and there could be an especially popular telescope that there are lots of lines for. And it'll also allow people to kind of move between telescopes and not worry about tripping over equipment or other people's gear. I was going to mention putting up some signs. You could put up some signage about your organization if you're a center, or yourself, if you want to share that with folks. If you don't have a permanent installation of your star chart for the night, then you can make one. And I'll go through that with folks here in a second. I'll show you how you can make your own star party handout for the night of your event here in a minute. It's probably a good idea, if you think of it, to have a list of resources for the guests to have. I mean, you can recommend your favorite apps, astronomy apps, excellent books to use, or websites that you think are helpful, or even a blog. I mean, I publish my skylights every Sunday. A lot of people refer to that when they're sort of planning what's coming up this week. I try to cover that pretty comprehensively in that. And that's nice if you can have a central table, maybe a little bit away from the, the main observing area, that we could have a bit of light maybe shining on the lists, and people can read those. So yeah, let me show you how you can make a star finder here. I'm just going to open up Heavens Above. And this is a little less obvious than it used to be. So I'm just going to share this and show you my suggested technique. So I'll share my screen here. Yeah. Share. So not everyone may be aware, but if you go to the heavens-above.com website, this is one that a lot of us use for space station passes and satellite predictions and things like that. Once you're here, you want to make sure that you've got the location for your observing site plugged in, and there's a process to click the name and bring up a map, and you can actually put in latitude, longitudes, and save a map. So once you've got your map, your location set up, then you want to look down this list, and you can see under astronomy, you've got interactive sky chart, and then there's sky chart old version. So the interactive sky chart brings up a date and clock where you can set the hour, the date, the hours, minutes, and seconds, and then update, and you can turn on and off certain features labeled on the map. So that's great, but that's not really particularly friendly for printing out and handing out something inexpensive to your guests. So what I usually do is I go back to this list and I go into the sky chart old version. So when that comes up, it's going to look like this. But if you scroll down a little bit, you can see there's an option to go black on white. Maybe set it to about 1,000. That makes a good, decent resolution image. And then you can set it to say, this is local time. So be April, May 23rd, 2023. Let's go to 2330. And I'll put on the ecliptic plane here as well. So I've got a constellation lines, names, and the ecliptic plane, and click update. And now you've got this. And this is easy to cut and paste into a plain paper document, or print this page and photocopy that and have a number of them on hand. Or you could simply send people to the website and let them do it on their phones. I just think it's kind of nicer to have a printed piece of paper, and you can teach them how they can then rotate the piece of paper depending on what direction you're pointing, and then explain the concept of the dot size gives you brightness, the center of the circle is the zenith, all the different things that we normally do. So I think that's a great way to do something inexpensive, and that's also accurate for the night. And you can tell them that it's going to be usable for the next number of days or week, but things will just on the margins will just change a little bit, and the planets and the moon, of course, would change. But that's a way you can approach that. All right, I'll stop sharing so that Charles can share some more neat pictures as we go here. All right, what else we got? Let's see. I was thinking. Go ahead.
I want to really quickly share this, because this is a really useful tool if you don't already know about it for planning your event. This is Clear Outside. It's created by a British astronomer in Essex. And I've brought that for my location here. Basically, for every day of the week, you've got the phase of the moon, and then if you click on the particular day you want, it shows you all of the day. It shows you the period with the darknesses. It shows you what all the different cloud layers are happening. It shows you the visibility. These are the ISS passes. It tells you exactly what time they're going over, and it shows you several days ahead. So this is a simple version. If you turn on the experimental features, it actually shows you even more levels of cloud. I have it on my iPhone. But it's a very useful tool if you're trying to figure out your skies for an event.
Yeah, I like that one. I like Astrospheric. That's another good one. It's got Actually, if you bring that one up, Charles, we can switch on the smoke layer and show everybody the bad news about the smoke. I do find that the clear outside that you just shared is probably the most pessimistic of the data sets. So it's the safest one to follow, if you know what I mean.
I do.
So this is astrospheric. It's a similar approach where it's got the each hour of the day into the future, 4 or 5 days worth. And you can see that the top row is the cloud cover, and the darker blue, the clearer the sky. Then you've got the second layer, which is the transparency, and the darker the blue, the better. And you can see that tonight, where I am, we're looking at terrible transparency. And then below that, you've got the seeing, or if you like, the windiness, turbulence of the sky. And you can see that it's pretty poor. There's not really any dark, deep blue in the foreseeable future here. And if you go to the top of this, there's a little button called layers. You can ask for the smoke. And that explains the problem with the transparency, that purple. So those of us here in the East are getting that smoke from Alberta coming down and spreading across the continent to the east. There's another image of it. And this will actually let you play through the different hours. But, that's a common thing that that beginners to astronomy, beginners to RASC get caught out on, is that, they'll see the clear sky in the forecast and they'll get all excited, get the equipment outside cooling down. And a bunch of us more jaded veterans will say, yeah, but it's going to be humid, or it's going to be smoky, or something like that. So yeah, good bit of advice on planning. All right, let's do this. Let's go back. A couple more things here. Let's see what we got next. I was thinking that if you've got a bigger star party, like a good sized crew on hand, that you could consider designating somebody to be the person answering the question about telescopes, because you're always going to get people asking what telescope to buy or what the best one is. Obviously, star parties like this are great if you've got a variety of equipment that you can actually direct people around to trying different types of telescopes, different, amounts of portability, aperture variations, things like that. But if you've got, if you got a big line of people waiting to look at Saturn in your telescope, and somebody wants to stop and chat with you about, what they should buy, it's great if you can send them over to Charles over there, and he'll tell you more about which one to get and the various pros and cons. Now, once you're up and running and people are basically gathered, I think it's always a great idea to give an announcement or an orientation to get people sort of ready for the night. You can have a kind of a sky tour to pointing out the main constellations, the main stars. That's a great idea. You can also coach them on the benefits of using red light and the fact you'd like them to avoid having flashlight photography or their white light shining near the observers. You could talk to them a little bit about, when you get ready to drive home, try to keep your headlights as low as you can, and maybe, don't sit and idle your car with your headlights shining on everybody's telescopes. Maybe get out of there as fast as they can, just to keep it as dark as we can. And you can also share some of the etiquette tips that we'll get to in the next section. And also, I think it's great if you can actually interrupt things from time to time, maybe after an hour or two, and just, do it again for those that might be latecomers, or just highlight some new things that have come up in the sky. And that also sort of rolls into the space station passes. So I would not want to plan a star party without checking to see if the space station was going to fly overhead. And you can have a lot of fun with that, because you can, you can warn people or not warn people, or you can tell them that you made a special order and just for them. There's all kinds of neat things you can do about that. And also you can take some time, if you like, to talk about the fact that Earth's shadow is above us, and satellites will appear and disappear as they enter in and exit from that shadowed region.
Hey, iridium flares. You can get those on Heavens Above. And I had one at the last observing session at the observatory, actually.
They're still happening?
There's
Yeah.
a few, yeah, they're replacing them with new satellites, so that won't be happening too much longer, but there's still some up there.
Well, we can all, and sometimes you get something like an iridium flare that you don't know what it is. It's just a piece of space debris tumbling and catching the sun. But no, it's nice to be able to be on hand to explain things like that when they happen too. Now, in terms of touring the sky, Charles has a great picture in the gallery there of the a flashlight beam that's pointing up. Again, it's kind of breaking a rule about the red light, but not everybody is allowed to use a laser these days in the sky, especially if you're near an airport. Lasers are like par excellence, so the sort of the best and easiest way to point things out, but they're not always allowed. So you can actually use a focused flashlight if you've got one. And I even in the notes mentioned a lightsaber. I've seen people do that where they just put a lightsaber and they point it at the sky, and that's a kind of a cool way of doing it as well. That's not so good for a huge crowd, but it's great if you have a little group of people around you and you've got your lightsaber and you can point here and there. So, yeah, so I'll pause there, and we're going to move into guests here in a second. But if anybody had any questions or comments, or if you have anything to chime in.
I haven't seen any questions in the chat. If you do have questions, you can put them in the chat or in Q&A. I'm watching both of these. There's all kinds of things to try and coordinate when you're doing one of these things, and it's always a good idea to maybe go through a rehearsal with your staff beforehand. You don't have to take your telescopes out, but you can just sort of walk through the procedure and the way you're going to do things. That gets everybody on the same page when the event takes off.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of centers have regular
They do.
public observing events, but a lot of them, fizzled out over COVID, and so we're all gearing them back up and resuming them. So there could be a little bit of rust to knock off, or there could be new members that haven't done them before that you'll want to train up. So, absolutely.
Yes, indeed. And don't forget solar observing, because a lot of the outreach that we do with my center anyway is during the day at various different festivals all over the Sunshine Coast, and it's broad daylight, and so we get the solar scopes out, and it's amazing how many people you draw into that because they don't realize you can see anything up there in the daytime. And of course you can if you've got your telescopes set up properly, show them Jupiter, Saturn, and broad daylight, Venus, so definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I was thinking of adding that to the mix, but I'm glad you added that in. And we'll definitely at some point in Insider's Guide, we'll try to do in a good weather time of the year, we'll try to do a live solar observing session on Insider's Guide. I think that'll be fun. All right, so what of your guest? And this is hopefully a lot of the viewers today on Insider's Guide will probably be veterans of RASC and stargazing. So this may be kind of, not preaching to the choir in a little bit, but hopefully there's some folks that will pick up on some thoughts or ideas that can help when they're planning to attend an event. So I like to advise people, don't be shy to approach the astronomer. If it's a star party, that's why they're there. They're there to share the sky and the passion of the sky, of the universe with you. So don't be shy about going up to them, but do be respectful of their equipment. Some of it's very expensive, some of it can be very delicate. So you want to be kind of a bit respectful and have them welcome you to the eyepiece. Always make sure or ask before you go ahead and approach and take your look in the eyepiece. The telescope may not be aligned yet, or the target might not be in view yet. There might mean a few seconds to get things ready for you. So you'll be, the astronomer will say, okay, fine, take care, you're good to go now. Try to avoid touching anything unless you're invited to. You might be invited to go ahead and adjust the focus. A lot of times people have different eyesight, need a different focus. So we'll usually show you where the focus knob is and let you adjust if you need to. Everyone's had the experience where some enthusiastic youngster will come up and say, look in there, and put their finger right on the lens. That happens. So you might want to have a lens cleaner or a lens pen. handy to clean that or swap in another eyepiece. How many people have gone up to your telescope that's pointing carefully at something and gone, oh, look at it, and drag the eyepiece towards their face, and then it's no longer aimed in the right place. So
Oh, I've
please
had
don't
that.
grab the telescope when you go up and take a look. Now, another fun thing I didn't talk about yet is, I like to do, if I'm doing a public star party, I sometimes bring a telescope that I just set out and say, go at it. You can tinker with it, play with it, look at it, look whatever you want. It's kind of free time. And then you can, go ahead. But if I'm trying to show people a certain thing, then you want to be, a little cautious about that. Okay, now you should expect to see something when you look in the eyepiece if you're a guest at a star party. If you don't be shy of mentioning it and say, ask why I can't see something. Now, a poor star party somebody over enthusiastic might be trying to show you something that it takes, an expert to see. That's not really the point of star parties, but ideally, everybody's got an object in the view that's easy for newcomers and unexperienced observers to look at. So it just may have drifted out of view, or maybe the alignment was a little bit off, or maybe you need some coaching on where to exactly put your head or put your eye. But definitely expect to see something, and don't just sort of walk away and nod if you didn't. It's fair enough to ask for satisfaction guaranteed when you're looking in the eyepiece. So don't be shy about that. And it happens all the time. We're all used to something not quite right, and we just fix it and say, okay, now look, it should be there now. Obviously, when if you're wandering around a field of telescopes and setups, you want to be careful when you're moving around in the dark. If you've got youngsters with you, hold their hand, don't let them run too free, too fast, because there could be cables, there could be battery packs, things that are at ground level in the dark. Lots of people have little red light flashing lights and things to warn them of tripod legs, but not everybody does. So you just want to be able to avoid, a mishap that way. And again, you don't want to bump into with somebody's telescope, bump into their tripod, or knock their telescope out of alignment. So again, just, go slow, be patient. You'll get to it. You'll get to see what you need to see. Now, when it's your turn to look, I like to coach people to don't rush. You'll have a lineup of people and somebody will just take a glance and then say, yep, and walk away. But that may not be the best view of the object, because the sky, there may be some turbulence. You'll get moments of clarity, moments of less clarity. So, take your time, don't be unreasonable about it, but, take 20 seconds, take a nice long look, and breathe while you're watching. So you want to make sure your eyes are fully oxygenated. You're getting the benefit of the good view. So take your time, take a good long look, wait for things to really, sharpen up as they may do, and you'll be much more happy for the experience. Go ahead and ask questions. So if you want to know more about the object, as I said, ideally the astronomers have got a little bit of fun facts in their pockets that they can share with you. So be sure to ask questions. Sometimes some of us know more than other of us, and I know that if I don't know the answer, then I'll say, well, go ask Jenna. She knows, or send them somewhere else. Shout out to Jenna. So that's fine. Also important, if you're fascinated by the object, don't pull out your phone and immediately open up a browser and start, looking up more information on while you're there beside the telescope, because that'll come into our red light, our dim light etiquette here in a minute. So put a pin in that for a second. Consider bringing your own chairs, binoculars, even your own telescope. You may or may not be able to enlist some help from the astronomers with your telescope. That sometimes is part of a star party, sometimes not. It depends. But most of us would encourage people to bring their own equipment. That's great, and we'll help you get the most out of it. And once we've shown you something and toured the sky with you, you can sit down in your chair with your binoculars and do some more, exploring or revisiting some of those things. Some people don't realize that if you are a smoker or a vapor, that can affect the optics of our telescopes, the objective lenses, the primary mirrors, the eyepieces, and so on. So if you do want to smoke or vape, try to stand away from the telescopes or downwind of the telescopes ideally, because that's something that we don't appreciate, you know, getting on our optics. Now I mentioned about taking the pictures, so I mentioned it from the side of the host in terms of the guests. Try to be, if you're planning to capture a picture of what you're seeing through the telescope, try to be already familiar with your camera and or your phone app on your phone. You don't want to be learning how to take a dim object picture while you're there at the telescope, because then you could be holding up lots of other people. So try to be familiar with what you're going to do. Give it a go. If it doesn't work initially, consider stepping aside and letting the next person have their look while you kind of debug what's going on. And the other thing is, if there's a long list of people that all want pictures, maybe somebody could offer to take a picture and share it, right? Just share it onto social media or email it to the other folks in the group. That's also a good option. Dressing up for cold and for bugs. So astronomers, we're used to the conditions we operate in. We're not going to be surprised if there are mosquitoes around this time of year, and we're not going to be surprised if our toes and fingers are getting cold. But sometimes guests don't really think about it, that they're going to be standing around in the dark and the cold. So that's a great thing to share with folks, that when you're inviting them to a star party, to advise them on that. But yeah, bring more warmer clothes than you think you're going to need, and be ready for insects and things like that. And by the way, just like vaping and smoking, try not to spray your insect repellent around anyone's telescope. That's also frowned upon. It's not a great idea. I'll pause there and see if anybody has any thoughts or questions so far.
Well, we had somebody ask, Carl B, how do you advertise just to RASE members for a star party? And I confirmed that he's talking about RASE star parties here. Well, first of all, if your center's got a website, get it on there. You know, that's a great place to let your own members know. If you go to the Rascal list, you can tell everybody in the society, just create a post and put it out there. You can also, you know, Facebook and Twitter are things that Bicenter uses regularly to announce that we're doing stuff like this. And you can also send your notice to head office, and we can put it in the newsletter for everybody. So there's all kinds of opportunities to get out there. One thing I also want to throw in, now that my astronomers are starting to get those new generation telescopes that show up on your app rather than in an eyepiece, these are the sort of things that you can use to share, because it's got Wi-Fi. You can get multiple people looking at the object with their own devices. It's something to, but you want to probably take them over to one side where whatever light is coming from the devices isn't shining in the face of somebody that's using a telescope next to you. So something, and that allows you to, you know, share the picture immediately if somebody wants to say that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a new era after post-COVID. There's so many more people are used to posting and sharing. I mean, you could literally have a Zoom meeting running at your star party and have people tuning in to get various streams. And that's something that, well, I've not yet done, but I can visualize that.
Somebody said, make sure to ask your attendees to leave the flashing shoes that children love to wear at night so much.
That is in the list. We're going to get there. Yes.
Okay. There.
I'm glad we have a hive mind here going. Lots of good ideas. Yeah. That's another reason also, if you've got a larger space to work in, that you can set aside a zone where you're not too much worried about light. Yeah, so send folks over there. Yeah, so let's talk about red light etiquette. That's the next heading I've got in the list. So, hopefully you can either let folks know in advance before they come, or do that during your orientation, the impact of white light and flash photography on the observing and how it affects your dark adaptation and things like that. Now, hey, if you're doing a full moon star party, then no problem. Nobody's going to worry about it too much. It's already going to be bright as all get out there. But if you're trying to look at some deep sky objects, then it's important to try not to, I'm gonna take a flash photo of my son or daughter while he or she is looking through the telescope. That's kind of spoils the fun. So as long as you gently advise people on that and the benefits of it, then they'll keep that in their minds for their future outings, and they'll know that they'll get more out of the night sky, even if they're camping or at a cottage or something like that, if they use the red light mode on their headlamp or whatever they might have. Deep red flashlights are fine. People can bring red flashlights. We also want to coach them to try not to keep them too bright. If they're tunable, maybe you can turn them down to a minimum brightness. You can also, if you're desperately wanting to use your phone or your tablet, then you can find apps that'll turn your screen red or red-ish. Couple that I'll mention are, there's one called Twilight that's for Android phones, and then there's one called Redshift for iPhones. And they'll essentially turn whatever's being displayed, regardless of the application you're using, a bit reddish. Another thing you can do is get some red gel film, like ruby lith, something like that. And you can either, you can get forms of it that are adhesive, that'll peel on and reusable. But a lot of people just maybe make a little frame and then tape some of the red film and be able to put their phone screen or their tablet screen behind it. And that's actually helpful because you might be using an app that has a red mode, but then you'll get a text and it'll come up in white and it'll kind of blind you. So you got that. And before heading out, cover the lights on the kids' shoes or ask them to wear different footwear. And if there are any sort of light up toys, you want to ask, can they please, leave those at home and pick something else? So yes, excellent point about that. And those can be bright when you're dark adapted and somebody runs by with their heels flashing. It can really sparkle in your eyes. All right, let's talk a little bit about mobile apps.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of our members is a pretty retired now ophthalmologist of some serious reputation, and he pointed out to us that amber actually also works for night vision, and if you are set up on a grass field, works better because you can actually see the ground, whereas with the red light it's kind of absorbed and you can't. It's like walking on black velvet. So something to keep in mind.
Sure. Okay, I didn't know that. That's a great thing to know. So try that one out. Okay, a little bit about apps. So these days, a lot of people are keen to have an app on their phone. There are various grades of apps. I like the ones that show the sky more realistically. There are some of the apps that by default, the planets are all enlarged and look super big, which is great that you can recognize which planet is which, but it can be misleading on how easy or not that planet is to actually see in the sky. Even though you know where it should be, if it were Mars and your app shows Mars as a big red, ball with a white polar cap on it, in the sky these days, if you look for Mars, it's going to be rather meek because it's so faint now. But that's fine. So pick the app that you like. Most of the good apps, they'll have a red mode, so you can actually switch them into night mode, and they'll turn the whole app screen red. But again, that won't stop a text message from popping up in white. So you want to be aware of that. That's where the red film actually works better than the red mode of the app. And so, as I said, a lot of us can share our favorite astronomy apps. Things like Stellarium Mobile is very good right now, and Rask has been delivering training sessions on how to use Stellarium for desktop and for mobile. So you can look into learning more about that. It's become very fully featured lately. Sky Safari is one that many of us have been using for a long time. It's completely feature filled for serious astronomers. It can maybe be a little bit more than beginners need, but it's a great app, and you'll grow with it over time as you get to learn more. So Stellarium, Sky Safari, Starwalk 2 is another app. And there are a few more that people probably will recommend in the chat that they like to use as well. Now, once you've got your app loaded on your phone, you want to make sure that it's set to your current location and the current time. That usually happens by default, but you know, if it's not set that way for whatever reason, then you're not going to be able to match up what you're seeing in the sky with what's shown on the app. And it's particularly important if you're let's say you're traveling on vacation, maybe you've gone to the Dominican Republic and you want to look at the night sky there, then you want to make sure that your phone, your app knows you're there instead of back in Calgary or wherever you happen to come from. Another neat thing that I recommend is that if you really want to learn the sky and figure what's what, you might want to consider tweaking the settings on your app to reduce the number of stars displayed until it sort of matches what you're seeing in the sky with your eyes. That'll let you really do a one-to-one mapping between what's on the screen and what's in the sky. That won't stop more objects from appearing as you zoom in, with your finger swipes on your phone. But when you're looking at the whole sky, it'll map the brightest stars to the brightest stars on your phone's display. Then once you get used to that, then you're fine to add a few more stars to get yourself more and more deep into it. Personally, my personal preference is on an app, I like to have the constellation line showing. I just think it's easier if somebody's trying to point you to an object in Lyra, for example, then you've got the star pattern of Lyra obviously noted on the app so that you can then from that point then figure out where you're going to go for the double or something like that, double star. You can add, if you want to add on the deep sky objects, constellation names, stars names, things like that, that's up to you. I also like to have the ecliptic line displayed on the app just because I think it's a great way to let people know that this is the band around which we would find the sun, moon, and planets. You're not going to find the planets, up there beside the Big Dipper, things like that. So the ecliptic helps them sort of identify whether a bright object could be a planet rather than a bright star. Okay, a couple other things. A lot of people like to use the phone with VR mode where they have the compass enabled and they can swing the phone up in the sky and follow it around. That's great. But the only problem is that when you put your phone back down, now you're no longer looking up at what you were just doing. So it's kind of hard to, put your hand down and then read up or learn what you were just looking at. You kind of have to keep it that way. So my preference is actually to turn off the compass and just kind of swipe to match the sky. And that way it's going to be on the display no matter what, if you're showing your friend or something like that. Also a little tip there. And the other thing is if you do want to use the VR set, it's important to calibrate your compass and gyro. And most apps, the way you do that is you sort of turn them on and you flip your phone in all the different axes several times. And that will then match up to the sky better when you lift it up. So that's all the tips I have. And I'm open to hear anyone else's thoughts too, and yours, Charles, if you have anything more to add.
That's great. I just put the upcoming star parties links on there for everybody to look at. And somebody was saying, yes, you can get community newspapers to post your event. My center does have a weekly astronomy article that goes out there. One of our members does, and we use that too. But the question originally was about how do we tell just RASC members. But yes, of course, if you want to get the public, things like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter are good for that too. But there are all kinds of community. For example, in my community, there is a site where all of the volunteer centers can post their events, and so everybody just looking for an event on the coast can go there, and yours can be there along with everyone else's. Yeah.
Or science centers and museums, sometimes they post post events like that. So that's another great idea. Yeah. So, we've got a few minutes before we need to dip into our finest NGC corners. So I thought, you and I, and also the audience could share, some suggestions for great things to look at in the sky, at a public event over the next few months. I mentioned the planets are going to be back. kind of July, August, September range. Those will be great times. But what about other things, other favorites people have? I'm happy to see some comments come up and share some ideas there.
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue that you deal with, especially in the summer when you get a lot of people who want to see things, is the nights are shorter up here. You don't have as much time to look at stuff. And when you get the really good long nights, it's so cold nobody wants to come except for
Yeah.
people who are really dedicated. So you got to think about trying to work around that sort of stuff. When we start our observing sessions, we start at sunset because we know I can show you Venus, I can show you planets already.
Yeah.
We can go on as it starts to get darker to double stars, and we can go to star clusters. And as it gets darker, you go further out. So it's that's one way to go around. Someone's suggesting the Hercules cluster, Messier 13. Yes, extremely awesome. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I see that comment about the coat hanger. That raises a great point. That the more binoculars objects you can share, the better too, because then people can, they can head home and continue the fun on another night with their own equipment if they only happen to have binoculars.
Yeah, take a look at those asterisms. One of our volunteers, that's one of his favorite things. Everybody is looking at Saturn or looking at the Crab Nebula, and he's going, look, it's the coat hanger, look, here's a Christmas tree. He likes to go after just the asterisms, so if you've got somebody that's into that and knows them, you can have a lot of fun and entertain people with that.
So the owl cluster is great for that, right? The
Yeah.
ET cluster, owl cluster, because it looks like a critter. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I actually discovered that M13 that somebody suggested here, the Hercules cluster, has got a couple of 3 different dark lanes in it, and it's been described multiple times by astronomers at the ages as a propeller. There's all kinds of different things you can do with those.
Yeah, I mean, Alberio is fantastic. The thing that I love about Alberio is that it sits in the middle of the summer triangle, and I like to suggest that that's the flux capacitor from Back to the Future. And then people remember that, and then they know where to find Alberio, that way.
Yeah, well, it's also very colorful, 7 stars with an amber and a blue star. If you can find combinations of stars that have got colors, carbon stars and stuff, that's fun too, because you can show people some interesting stuff.
Yeah, carbon stars are fantastic. The garnet star is a really good one. There's a few others around that are easy.
Someone's posted an ad for the Southern Alberta Star Party in September. Thank you. Anyone else have suggestions for star parties? Please put them in there.
Yeah, share them with everybody. Many of them were listed. There was a RASC list. There was a Sky News back in February made a list that you can find. But absolutely, what else have I got here? Mizar is great. Mizar is that visual double, but when you put it in a telescope, it expands and splits, so you can get even more out of it. The double is a great one. Epsilon Lyrae is a popular one. Usually most of our star parties are more suburban, less rural, so we're not really as easily able to show people, the Trifid and the Lagoon Nebula, things like that. But if you've got electronic assisted astronomer equipment, then those are great. You could show those even from the city. Yeah, globulars are really good targets for the summer sky. Lots of them around, and you can get the ones we did an insiders show on globulars where you can show some people the ones that are very compressed and other ones that are very diffuse. M81, M82.
Someone's suggesting Mount Kobo. Yes, definitely.
What was that last one?
Mount Kobo.
Mount Kobo party. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. A lot of my
I'm glad.
there. A few years ago, they had a forest fire up there. They're all running from the site with the telescopes. But I think we've passed that now. So
I see somebody in the Q&A asked about how to quickly display a picture of the moon.
There you go.
So if you're talking about what I did, basically all I did was I jumped forward about 2 weeks to when I knew the moon was full, and I just centered it and zoomed in on it. So, and you can always capture those images if you want to. Say you wanted to make a moon map. Actually, let me just show everybody how you can make a moon map. That's a good idea.
Let's do that.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to center up, go into the evening sky here, and I'll jump forward a couple weeks here. So I'll center up the moon. So most versions of Stellarium will be able to do this for you. It doesn't have to be full, whatever phase you want it to be. What I recommend is, so take a scene like this and go down and turn off the daylight, and that'll increase the contrast in your view a little bit. And also you can turn off, I've got the Milky Way in the background here. I'm just going to turn off the Milky Way picture there. And you can leave the stars on or off if you want. And then if you go into the settings tab, the F4 tab on the left-hand side, and go into the solar system options, then you can go and say, show the planetary nomenclature. So you can put a check mark in here, and that'll bring up labels on the moon. And if you don't like the glow in the dark green I've picked, then you can actually pick, you know, whatever colors you want. There you go. Probably something else than those two. But that way you could, and there's unfortunately in Stellarium, I'm not aware of a way to winnow down the number of labels. More labels will appear when you zoom in, but they're kind of fixed at this font size. So it makes it a little bit hard to just label exactly what you want. But obviously Rask already has all kinds of moon maps produced by the national and by a few of the centers, so you could do that as well. And then if you wanted to capture the scene, you'd use there's a Control S command that'll make a picture of this in a folder on your desktop on your computer, and then you could, you know, print it out or work with that. Hopefully that sort of answers the question.
I think that does it. Someone's advertising stellafane.org. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to set up then for our finest NGC.
Okay.
While I'm doing that, you can continue the dialogue there. Let's see this.
Well, there's all kinds of opportunities out there for star parties, and if you haven't done one, don't be afraid to try it. You know, get a few friends together and grow it from a smaller event into a bigger one, and get your experience as you go. We have one that we do that we did for years down at Corpus Bay Provincial Park. We would go around the time of the Perseid meteor shower, and we would have a booth with information and the solar scopes going all day, and then we would have a dinner break, and then they have an auditorium, outdoor auditorium, where we would do a presentation. And by the time that was over, the rest of the members had got their night scopes set up, and everybody would line up to look at the night sky. So you had all of these people who were camping in the park coming to be part of the event, who most of whom had no idea what the star party was about or what they were about to experience. And we get hundreds of people. It was a lot of fun.
That's fun. Yeah, the Toronto Center has a group out in Pickering, for those that are near me. One Friday a month, they gather by the shores of Lake Ontario in Pickering, and they start early, so 6 to 11 p.m. So they're doing solar observing in the first end of it, and then dark sky observing at the latter part of it. I think it's this week. So if you're in the Toronto area, check the raskto.ca website, and you can see the go, no go for the Millennium Square Star Party Friday night. All right, let's switch over here. Let's switch horses, and we'll do some finest NGCs. So I've been saying this for a while now, that the finest NGC list produced by Alan Dyer and published in the Observer's Handbook is heavily weighted towards the spring. So that's meant that in order to get through the objects in the time frame that they'd be in the sky, we need to cover more objects per session. So we're going to do another 9 of them today. And again, I'm not able to just pick weeks where the moon is new. So we're just going to do it regardless of what the moon phase is, and bring you into awareness of these objects so that later on you can, pick a night where the moon is cooperating and look at them then. So here's the list we've got for tonight, for today. There we go. And much like last time, I've got a nice little grouping, so they're kind of all in the same neighborhood. And at this point of the year, at least at the latitude of Toronto, the sky is getting totally dark around 10:30. But you could start around 10 o'clock, and as you work into the objects, the sky will get darker and darker. And again, because I'm looking at objects that are near the zenith in late evening, I'm actually going to use Stellarium and switch off and switch to equatorial mode. You can see down here in the bottom, there's a button for equatorial mode. And that means that I can actually move things around without them tipping over too much. So it's easier to navigate everybody when things aren't tipping over too much. So do that. All right. So first up, let's move some things around here. Take these on there. Yeah. So first up, we've got a real nice showpiece. It's the Cocoon Galaxy, or as Charles informed me, which was great, that in South Africa, they call this the rhino and calf. So let's bring this up. And this is actually really easy to find. I'll show you why in a second here. Whoops, let me bring up where's my deep sky objects here? That's why. Okay, there we go. So there's the Cocoon Galaxy. This is a small but bright, distorted spiral galaxy. Stephen O'Meara, who has superhuman eyesight, claims that he can see this in his 7x50 binoculars. I've not tried it, but maybe. I'm happy to hear of anybody that does that. But that basically means that any size of a telescope, good quality telescope, should be able to pick this up. And of course, the bigger your telescope, the more details that you're going to be able to observe. Discovered by William Herschel back on January 14th of 1788. And he actually noted the 2 parts that you're seeing here. So there's the rhino and the calf, if you want to think of it that way. There's numbered 197 and 198 of his class 1 objects. So this is actually NGC 4485. And I guess the gravitational interaction of the two galaxies has produced this sort of bending of the arm or the disk of the galaxy. And there's actually, in some views, you can even see a kind of a star stream linking the 2 of them up. So collectively, these are also known as ARP 269. So ARP is the catalog of peculiar galaxies. So easy to find because it's sitting here just 0.6 degrees northwest of this bright star Chara, which is Beta Canis Venatici. And so if you just Control B here, you put your finder scope on Chara, or even if you put your low power eyepiece on Chara, there's the galaxy sitting right next door. Now, you probably are going to want to magnify things a little bit in order to keep the bright light of Chara out of your field of view. So what I recommend is maybe pick an ocular like 64X, something a little bit more, so you can start picking up some more of the details in it. So you want to use averted vision on this galaxy, of course. You're going to try various magnifications to pick up more aspects of it. You're going to want to note the shape and the orientation. You might be able to see some structure if your aperture is big enough. So some knots of star formation, things like that. And maybe you can even detect that connection to the little companion galaxy if your telescope's big and your sky is very dark. This is about 27 million light years away. Now, my tip is to go next to Caldwell 26, which is also, actually, before we do that, let's go out a little bit further. So we're going to extend Cor Coralie to Chara and continue heading out to NGC 4111. So we'll do that one next. That's a bright edge on lenticular. Now, Stellarium doesn't have an image for it, so you need to put on the Digital Sky Survey tab in Stellarium to bring that up. So there you go. This is edge on, so it's compact enough to be visible in any size of quality telescope. Discovered by William Herschel on January 4th of 1788, number 195 of his class 1 objects. It's 5.2 degrees west-northwest of Chara. And that, just to sort of get everybody in perspective here, is in the direction of the lower arm of Ursa Major. So this the star Psi and the star Chi, Ursa Majoris. So that's what you want to sort of head in that direction, but you're going to stop, you know, less than a palm's width from Chara. Let's see. You could also look for this little grouping of stars. Let's just pull back a little bit here. Stellarium's a little bit jerky. This grouping of stars, 67 Ursa Majoris, is in the same neighborhood. And actually, if I put up the telescope view, and I'm just going to go back to my lower eyepiece. So you can see that they'll actually share the field of view. So the galaxy and that trio of stars is a great way to narrow yourself into view. Another way you could do it is you could split the difference between Psi, Ursa Majoris, and Cor Coralie, and then slew up a little bit north from there. But I think either of those will work. You've got a magnitude 8 field star right next door. Let me just wind back a little bit here and zoom in. Nice bright field star right beside it. You want to use your reverted vision again. You want to look for various magnifications to see how much you can extend the tips of the halo, note the characteristics of the core. If you have a larger aperture telescope, then it should get a little bit longer, extend a little bit longer in your field of view. There's been reports that you can see some variation in brightness along the slash of light. So see if you can see that. And then you can watch for some of the nearby galaxies. So if I bring up the galaxy list here, so there's a bright galaxy here, another one here, and then there's this very faint but large galaxy. This one's called PGC 38356. So that would be kind of maybe an imaging target if you're imaging this area. This would be a cool area to do an image. You could use your account at the Burt Gaffney Robotic Observatory. I think that would be a great field to go after that using that, but not for your visual observing certificate, but do that later. Observe it first visually and then use the BGO. All right, let's wind back a little bit here. All right. So just to keep things tidy. So that's these two done. And then we're going to go down to Caldwell 26. And what's great about this one is that you can actually use the stick of Canis Venatici. And if you take this span from Cor Coralie to Chara and swing it to 90 degrees, that's almost precisely where Caldwell 26 or the Silver Needle Galaxy is. So this is another really terrific showpiece. Look at that. It's its length is upwards of half the lumen's diameter, or so approaching 15 arc minutes in length from end to end. It's again visible in big binoculars and any size of telescope under dark skies, discovered by William Herschel back on March 17th of 1787, number 41 in his class 5. So that would be my recommendation to finding it, is doing that 90-degree angle. You could also kind of use Zosma in Leo as your direction you're heading. And that's another way of doing it. So you want to note the orientation, any structure you might see in the disk, and any asymmetry. So you'll notice that, the either end are not equally bright. So there's some things to look for, some details to look for there. Now, when you're in the neighborhood, I recommend doing these as a 2-for-1 because it's relatively easy to get to NGC 4228 while you're in the neighborhood. And the little twist on this one is that it has a dual NGC number. So in Stellarium, it's known as 4228, but in some apps and other lists, you'll see it listed as NGC 4214. So this is a relatively bright starburst galaxy. It resembles the Large Magellanic Cloud. It's visible in pretty much any good quality telescope, especially if your sky is dark. So William Herschel first identified it on April 28, 1785, and then his son John later looked at it and assigned a different number to it. So that's why it's got the two NGC numbers. But as I said, if you're going to search for it, you might need to use the 4228 number if the 4214 doesn't work for you. So what I suggest doing to find this one is to star hop. I'll just put on my field of view here. So you should be able to star hop south from the Silver Needle. It's basically one field of view at 1.5 degrees. So once you're at the one, just slew yourself south. And of course, my telescope view is flipped over here. So I'm going upwards instead of downwards. Or you could actually aim your finder scope midway between Alkaid and Zosma. So let me just show you what that would look like. So I'm just going to bring up so there's Alkaid at the tip of the Big Dipper's handle, and there's Zosma, and this galaxy sits right at the midpoint of the line connecting them. So that's another way of getting yourself in the neighborhood if you don't want to star hop from the other galaxy. So use your averted vision again, obviously. You can try different magnifications and try to pick up some of the internal structure, note its shape, maybe sketch its shape, things like that, and note the field stars. So there are some field stars kind of embedded or superimposed on the galaxy itself. This one's about 11 million light years away. Last up in this neighborhood, we've got NGC 3941. And this is a small elliptical galaxy. Again, no picture in Stellarium, so I'm going to add the deep sky image. There you go. So you can, this one's compact enough to be visible in 6-inch or larger telescopes. Discovered by William Herschel back on March 19th of 1787. It's number 173 on his class 1 objects. And this one's located halfway between one of Charles's favorite things. I'm just going to turn this off so we can zoom out a little bit. Turn on my pointer here. Between Chara and Alula Australis, which is the southernmost star in the 3 pairs of the 3 leaps of the gazelle.
3 leaps of the gazelle, right.
Yeah. So you want to find the easternmost footprint and look at the lower star and just put your finder midway between that star and Chara, which we've already used to find a couple of these others. So that'll get you in the neighborhood. This was going to be pretty simple to describe, so you just want to use your averted vision and a few different magnifications to kind of pick up on its, its shape, its orientation, and see if you can see any difference between the core and the halo. It's about 36 million light years away. So that's the first group. That's your first group of 5. And then from here, we're gonna do an easy one. We're gonna go up to NGC 3877. And what makes this one so easy is that it's tucked in close to this bright star. Now in Stellarium, its name is Taiyang Shou, but it's actually Chi Ursa Majoris. And just bring this up here. So this is another one with no picture. So I'll just bring up the picture for you. Look at that. It's a nice, healthy sized lozenge-shaped galaxy. Bright enough for 6-inch and larger telescopes. Center this up here again. Discovered by William Herschel back on February 5th of 1788. It's his number 201 of his class 1 objects. And again, it's so easy to find because you've got this bright star in your field of view. And the trick though, the trick though is that you're going to want to crank up the magnification so that you can actually hide the bright star. So let's just do an Alt-O and we'll select maybe the 6mm eyepiece. So experiment with a few different things and placement of the object in the field of view, but you're basically going to want to hide that bright star outside of your field of view. So this is one where You're again going to want to note its size and orientation. It's got some structure to it. So if you do have a bigger telescope, you can try to look for some internal structures, some dark dust lanes and things like that. And again, note that it's a little bit asymmetrical, so that it's not going to be the same at both ends. This one's about 55 million light years away. So really easy one to find. Let's bring this back to this. So now we have a neat trio. And what's great about these trio is that you can galaxy hop between them. Once you found one, then you've got the other two for free because they're so close to one. So the first one up is NGC 4026. Center this one up. There we go. So this is a medium-sized lozenge-shaped galaxy. Just bring up its image here. There you go. Edge-on lenticular galaxy. It's bright enough for about an 80 millimeter telescope and higher. So the bigger your scope, the more you'll see, but you should be able to see at least its smudge with an 80 millimeter telescope. Discovered by William Herschel back on April 12th of 1789, number 223 of his class 1 objects. Now, it's located near Phecda, part of the Big Dipper's bowl. So this is the lower corner of the Big Dipper here. And another way of doing it, so you can kind of make a triangle with that Chi, Star, and Phecda if you want. Or I noted that it's about midway between Alioth. Now, where's Alioth here? Alioth and Psi. Actually, yeah. So you can sort of see it just a bit below the midpoint between those two stars. So if you aim your finder midway between Alioth and Psi, you should be able to pick it up that way. Again, obviously, you want to use your averted vision. I'll just put it in the eyepiece view here for us. There we go. So this is at about 150 power. If we go down to, say, 65x, it's still a reasonable size to do that. So you're going to want to, again, note its shape and orientation, describe its core, which I think you can distinguish from the disk and halo, and see how far you can extend the tips on either end. There's also a bright field star nearby that you'll want to note that. It's about 42 million light years away. Okay, now from here, I'm just going to go to my stellarium and pick my lower power eyepiece. Again, I'm simulating the field of view of a 26 millimeter Plössl in a 6-inch Dobsonian reflector. And so that gives me about a 1.5 degree field of view. And so you can see here, I've got NGC 4026, and there are my other two finest NGCs that I'm chasing down. So I can actually just slew my eye at my telescope a little bit to the east, which is to the right in this view, and pick up 4088. And I'm just going to zoom in on 4088 here so you can see it. This is a great one. Look at that. Amazing. So it's a very bright, nearly edge-on spiral galaxy. It should be visible in medium-sized telescopes and larger under dark skies. Discovered by William Herschel on March 9th of 1788. Object number 206. By the way, he wasn't discovering these three on the same night, which is kind of interesting. It has a nearby companion galaxy, which is just here in the field of view. I'll just put on the designation here. You can see it. NGC 4085, which is nearby. And again, they share the same field of view. That has probably led to some warping of the structure of this galaxy. You can see it's kind of a strange shape. That's what's produced it or put it on the ARP list. So number 18 on ARP's list. So you can use that galaxy hop technique, or you could actually put your finder midway between Mizar and that star Psi Ursa Majoris again. So again, describe as much of the shape and size and orientation as you can see. And also don't forget to look for the companion nearby as well. This one's about 45 million light years away. All right, I'm going to put it back in the eyepiece view here, and we're going to finish up with our NGC 4157, which again, just go ahead and nudge the telescope over and take a look. And you've got it in your field of view. This one is nearly edge on, Look at that. Beautiful bright slash of light in the eyepiece. This one's going to be bright enough for medium-sized and larger telescopes. In fact, if you've got a smaller telescope, give it a try. Let us know if you're able to see it, because it does look like it'd be reasonably bright. Discovered by William Herschel back on March 9th of 1788, on the previous night of the previous object. So these did come on the same night, object 208. So it's, you could also, hopefully you're doing these all three together, but if you didn't, you could also aim your finder 70% of the way from Mizar to that star Chi Ursa Majoris. So again, averted vision, different magnifications, size, orientation. Watch out for the field star at the end of the disk, edge of the disk here, and another one at right angles to the disk. Describe the core. Look for the dust. There's some dust in this one, and again, a really asymmetrical lozenge shape. So that one's about 50 million light years away, and that's it for now. I think we've got one more group of spring objects, and then we're done. Any questions?
Don't see any there. Just in case you were wondering, that name, the Rhino and the Child, comes from South African astronomer Magnus Stryker from 2006, and then all of our colleagues jumped on it, so you see it all over the place if you're in that part of the world looking at the sky. I think it's a great name for it.
Yeah, and I bet it's not the only name for it.
Oh, we're working on that.
I know you are. Good. Excellent. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope everyone enjoyed that, and you know, give us some feedback on what you see of these and how you manage with them. I'm happy to hear that. We'll be back.
All right. We'll see you next time for some more Insider's Guide to the Galaxy.